as colleagues, students, or as anyone who is remotely invested in the present and future of higher education in India, we are all familiar with the name Professor Dr. C. Raj Kumar. Under his extraordinary leadership, O.P. Jindal Global University has become the #1 private university in India and one of the leading universities in the world. We all know the story of Professor Dr. C. Raj Kumar and how he has come to India, how he has set up this university and made it the kind of an extraordinary institution of higher education as it is today. And we are really, really fortunate that today Professor Dr. C. Raj Kumar has taken out a time from his really, really busy schedule to talk about the man behind this vision. And we are really fortunate that we would be able to talk about him, about this journey from a point of view that perhaps not been heard before. So welcome, Raj, and thank you so much for joining us here today. And we want to have a candid conversation with you, and we want to understand that the vision and the leadership that you brought in to create this magnificent institution of higher education, how did it take root? Growing up in Kanyakumari, a young Raj, what was the vision? When I was a young child, I wanted to become an astronaut. Somebody wants to become a musician. Somebody wants to become a painter. What did a 10-year-old Raj want to be?
Thank you very much, Upasana. And well, it's such a pleasure to have this conversation because most of the time we've been busy with building the university in the last over a decade. But listen, my childhood was not very different from number of young people across the country. I come from a middle-class family background. My mother is a doctor, my father is a professor, and one of the things that was instilled in us very early on was that education is the only thing that can empower us. And it was so deeply embedded in our dining room conversations, in our upbringing. Me and my brother, we are two. My younger brother is 6 years younger to me. But one thing that was very clear from the very beginning, and that was probably South India, Tamil Nadu, but also maybe India as well, is that the dominant thinking clearly at that time was that one needs to do well in your studies, and the goal is to become a doctor or an engineer. I consider myself as a part of the Three Idiots generation, where the overwhelming pressure, both direct and indirect, family and social, was to end up becoming a doctor or an engineer. Most of my cousins are doctors and engineers. So that was me. But then, I was honestly, good part of my childhood was spent on the cricket field. I was basically, I was much more interested in cricket than anything else, all the way till my high school. In fact, I'm so looking forward to watching this movie, which is going to be released in the next few days, 1983, because Kapil Dev was my hero. Little did I know that he, as you know, he's from Haryana. And at least at that time, I never thought I will be working in Haryana, which I am. But he was my idol. I spent, most of my school life, really aspiring to become a cricketer. I, of course, played for my school, captained my school cricket team, played for 3rd division. So in a way, studies was not at all part of my priority. Of course, while emphasis was on studies, I would do my studies to the extent that I am not ostracized by my parents, but I would spend most of my time playing cricket. But I was so immersed in the game that was giving me enormous satisfaction and even a purpose to continue doing what I was doing.
Wow, that's fascinating. So then how did this journey begin? I mean, you said that, conventionally, this is what happens in India. And you said that in your family, most went to become doctors or engineers. So when you decided not to take that path, did you face resistance? If yes, and because this is a story of many students, I think many would resonate with that. So yeah, one, did you face resistance? And if you did, how is it that you convinced a family who is so set on, children from the family becoming doctors and engineers, that you want to choose a different path?
In Chennai's context, if you are even a remotely serious student, you ought to be aspiring to become a doctor. If you are not good enough, you will end up becoming an engineer. You can have choices among the engineering disciplines you want to study, but this is it. In fact, as a friend of mine recently said, parents are very liberal about it. He said in a sarcastic manner, beta, you can choose whatever discipline you want within medicine. You can be a cardiologist or an ophthalmologist or whatever. So, but in 1989, that was a very important year. I completed my high school as in 10th standard, and then took my what we would consider as third group, or commerce, accountancy, economics. Pretty much the world came to know at that time that I'm not going to become a doctor or an engineer, because in India, one has to take that call very early on. I completed my high school. I was more motivated to do that. By that time, very unfortunately, I realized that while I was reasonably good at playing cricket and I liked it, maybe that was not my calling in life. And I joined BCom at Loyola College, Madras. That was a very important turning point in my life, because Loyola was a very coveted institution. I had a fantastic college life, I must say. I had fantastic friends. I had a wonderful experience of engaging with people from across the state of Tamil Nadu, not only confined to Chennai. But then the turning point really came when I decided to study law after my BCom degree. Now, this is a time when we are looking at 1994. Even if people were prepared to pardon me for the fact that I didn't become a doctor or an engineer, the natural outcome after having done a BCom degree is to become a chartered accountant. My entire class of BCom had essentially three sets of people. A good bunch of people were people who had family businesses. Then the second set of people were people who ended up becoming chartered accountants. That was another very strong pathway after BCom. And then the third set of people, almost a good number of them, ended up doing MBA in leading business schools in India and around the world. And then a very small number of people would do civil services. But I was a total outlier. Probably from my class, I was the only one, at least so far as my memory goes, who decided to study law. I have to say that the interest in law, to a large extent, originated because of my father, who was also a lawyer. It is LLB and LLM, but he's a criminologist. And the idea of crime and punishment, and why crimes happen, and what are the reasons for crime as a sociological phenomenon, these things were part of dinner table conversations. So that kind of made me think about law. But I will say this, that the most compelling reason that influenced my decision to study law was the fact that I realized that the leaders of the Indian freedom movement were lawyers. The fact that Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Ambedkar, Sardar Patel, all of them, Rajendra Prasad, they were all lawyers. They not only led the freedom movement, but they were deeply conscious of creating a society that will protect rights and ensure freedom and strengthen institutions. They were resisting colonialism, and in that process building a new India. So that kind of that was something that was deeply inspiring for me, and I decided to study law, and that of course brought me to Delhi, where I did my LLB degree from the Faculty of Law, University of Delhi.
Well, that is well, at a personal level also, I find it extremely inspiring to hear that, and I'm sure many of the young students and others who are listening to this will be inspired, because I want to understand, Raj, that it is one thing to have convictions. You are convinced about why you want to do law. It is another thing to be able to translate that convictions into others. So for young students, young aspiring lawyers or otherwise, who want to not be, part of the mold, because what you've told me is that it's not only that you did not want to be a part of the mold, you broke it, and you built one mold and you broke it again. You took chances, you took risks, because to be, in India, we expect students who are 17 or 18 to commit themselves to a life at that point of time, which will be the rest of their life, right? At 17 and 18, we want them to decide what would they do for the rest of their life. And that's a very strong conviction, which is there not only in parents, but society, community expects you to be able to be sure at that point of time. So the fact that you were not sure and you were okay to give yourself that room to understand and experiment. And once you were, to be able to convince others that this is something that you are going to go ahead and do. So could you say a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, listen, I mean, I'm deeply struck by the fact that even today, when we do meet with young students, I mean, since I moved to India, I've given over 10,000 talks across India. And even today, as late as last week, I was at an open house, and I think it was the last visit. It was in Lucknow, and in Lucknow, a student asked a very interesting question. The question was something like, "Sir, do you think I should study law? Is law good for me?" And the answer to that question is very personal, right? But then most of our education system, very unfortunately, has ended up choosing individual aspirations by somebody else. So we are, I must say that many a time, counselors, or for that matter, family members, are playing God and deciding, you will become a doctor, you'll become an engineer, you'll become a lawyer. And the fact is, the process of choosing one's study disciplines and careers is not only an organic process, but it's a very deeply personal process. And to have an informed decision as to what you want to do is not something that comes natural to everybody, and one has to go through a process. In fact, I will say this, that while I decided to come to Delhi to do my law degree, I have to confess that another objective at that time for me to come to Delhi was to take the civil service exam to become a civil servant, because I was also conscious of the fact that to contribute to nation building, civil services is a good idea, and to be an officer who can actually make a difference is something that I should pursue. But again, as you said, the plans got changed, and I became more interested in the study of law than seriously pursuing the study of civil services. So in some ways, one of the things that I've learned through this process is that you need to constantly evaluate your own aspirations. What you might have thought early on may not necessarily be the thing that you will ultimately pursue. But then, whatever you pursue, you try to do your best and get the best out of it, which will ultimately empower you to fulfill your dreams and aspirations. And many a time, those dreams and aspirations may not necessarily be the case, that what you intended at a point of time in the beginning may not be what it is at the end. And I will say this, that just as I liked the study of law and I pursued law, but the natural outcome there was to become a lawyer, which I didn't. To become a corporate lawyer, which I didn't. To become a litigating lawyer, which I didn't. To become a judge, which I didn't. So in a way, it's a constant effort to keep exploring newer opportunities and allow yourself to achieve your fullest potential by that discovery. It will be a huge mistake for anybody to force upon themselves a decision that has not come through that evolutionary process.
Well, I completely agree, and I think that very few would disagree with that it has to be an organic process. But my question to you, Raj, is that one of the things that propels us to do anything in life, I mean, there is something always at the back of your mind, which is the fear of failure. One of the reasons that we want or we let our families or our relatives or our friends to play God is also because we are scared that if we do not do that, then there are a lot of people standing out there to say that I told you so. So there is a constant fear of failure that also dictates the kind of decisions that we take in life. So what would you advise to young students to, who have dreams in their eyes and who want to, not fit into the mold or break the mold or do things differently? How does one get over the fear of failure?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is to cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness. All of us, at some point of time in our lives, we would end up knowing for ourselves what is it that really makes us happy, what is it that makes us feel meaningful and purposeful, and what is it that ticks us. Many things, for example, it's so interesting when you see a lot of young people, if you ask them to do something and for which they need to, let's say, wake up in the morning, they may not do it. But there are things that they may want to do for which they will wake up even before the time. And it's all of us have gone through this. And then we ask a question, what is it that kind of empowers you so much that the inner calling in life that you want to seek, which makes you feel so inspired that you don't need an external push. You don't need a facilitator. You don't even need a nudge for you to do that. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I strongly believe is that for me personally, and I say this to young people a lot, is that start finding your passion early on, and it can be anything. So today when I look back, I told you that good part of my schooling, almost from 5th grade all the way till 12th grade, I played cricket and I was obsessed with it. But the remarkable thing about what I did was, it has helped me even today. So when I was playing cricket, every day I would wake up at 5 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. latest. And I will just have to be in the field at 5:30 to start running. Now, I stopped cricket when I was in high school, but I wake up at 5 a.m. even now. So in some ways, certain things that you end up doing, your life becomes disciplined. Those habits will end up becoming part of their life. And that alone is going to give them a sort of a heads up.
So beautifully put, Raj. And I completely agree that there are no waste moments in life if you invest it wisely, if you do something that you're passionate about. And failure, I think this fear of failure that we were speaking about is not really failing at something. I think failure happens when you're unable to pick yourself up after you fail at something.
And many a time, Upasana, it's not so much about the failure when you have worked hard for it. It's entirely possible that you have failed not so much because you worked hard for it and you really wanted it, but you actually didn't work hard for it. You probably didn't believe in it. And so that doesn't even count as a failure, because I think the most important part of failure one has to recognize is that besides the fact that every failure has an important lesson to learn for future success, the biggest challenge, at least for students, is that to discover their passion and calling. Most of the time, people end up choosing things that was not their passion and calling. They end up putting half-hearted efforts into it, and they end up failing in those efforts and actually starting to believe that they are not good at it. Little do they realize that that is not even their calling. That is not even something that they are putting their best. And putting their best happens when what you're doing is something that you really like doing, because it comes natural to us. And this is an important lesson that we need to tell young people.
So I think young people should be also then forgiving towards themselves, to learn to forgive oneself and say that, okay, this didn't work. Perhaps this is not what I wanted, and to move on from there.
Absolutely.
And take the lesson with you.
Absolutely. Well, to be fair to a lot of young people, it's many a time it is not even them who need to be forgiving. It is the system, the society, the family, the extended relatives, even friends who end up forming judgments about each other. And unfortunately, that happens. In fact, the biggest challenge that we are facing today in the Indian context is with regard to building a startup culture. And the reason those challenges remain is that the nature of startup, or let's say any entrepreneurial initiative, is that you are inevitably going to try more than once, and definitely more likely to fail more than once, ultimately to seek that success.
Yeah, so your success and failure is not your alone. It is a community experience, so to put. Coming back to you, Raj, and your story. You went to Oxford, you went to one of the leading institutions, you were a Rhodes Scholar, but we believe that many of these things happened by accident, that it was not planned. So could you tell us a little bit about, how it happened? You said, you went into law, but you did not follow the traditional route. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. So as I said, I'm from Chennai, and I came to Delhi to do my law degree, and part of the aspiration was to become a civil servant. Quickly, I really enjoyed studying law, but it's quite extraordinary that we don't realize that how much financial matters play a big role. We come from a middle class family. As I said, my mother is a government doctor, my father is a professor. While the tuition fee in Delhi University was not something that we could afford, the fact that I was away from home means that there is a significant expenditure involved, living costs, food, other things. Mind it, all through my school and college, I was at home. That means the expenditure was not as much. But my parents, of course, could afford it, and they allowed me to pursue that dream of coming to University of Delhi and pursue what I wanted to study. So at no point of time in my entire law studies, I never aspired to study abroad. Because honestly speaking, now I must say that our students are hugely privileged. In fact, this generation is hugely privileged because of information revolution. In the year 1994 to 97, when I was in Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, very few people knew about the possibilities of studying abroad. There have been some of my seniors who went abroad. Many of them who did go abroad had better financial means. And something that got stuck in my mind was, it's an expensive affair. Going abroad is for rich people. And coming from a lower middle class family in India, with the father being a professor in a public university and the mother being a doctor, it's impossible for me to think about going abroad. And the fact that I am in Delhi was already a huge privilege, and that's good enough. So when I was all through those 3 years, even some of my batchmates were applying to study abroad, I was very clear, because I can't afford it. And it so happened that in 1997, when I graduated from law faculty, one of my friends had got the INLAC scholarship, and he was going to St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi, which is where the office of INLAC scholarship is. And it so happened I just accompanied him. And it's so interesting, when I was accompanying him to that office, adjacent to the INLAC scholarship office at St. Stephen's College, there is another office called the Rhodes Scholarship Office. And he had some paperwork to do, and I was curious to understand what is this Rhodes Scholarship, and I found out about it. And then they mentioned about this scholarship, and it allows people to study abroad and study at Oxford and things like that. And like a typical Indian lower middle class family person, I was so skeptical. I was like, there has to be some catch in this. How can they, give 100% scholarship to study? And then I started talking to people. And then I once again went to the office and confirmed. I asked questions like, okay, so tuition fee, what about food accommodation? And that also is covered. What about airfare? Yes, it is covered. What about money for woolen clothes? Yes, it is covered. What about visa fee? Because frankly speaking, we cannot even imagine how fixed and, let's say, regimented the family budget is for a middle class family. And I was And we were not poor, but my parents were ready to give the best of education within India. But their salary and their own financial standing by no means would allow them to support for an international education. So I had to be convinced beforehand that this scholarship is real and that it's worthy to apply, for it will cover everything that is needed as far as expenditure is concerned. So I then applied to the Rhodes Scholarship, and it was a very elaborate process, as you will be aware, and finally we got it. I got the scholarship in December 1997, and that, I think, was a very defining moment, because that made me realize what, let's say, empowerment of this kind in the form of scholarship can do for a person like me, who comes from a middle-class family. It would be impossible for somebody like me to think of going abroad, and the Rhodes Scholarship enabled me to do that.
Wow, that is, I think those young students who are, and I'm hoping they are listening to this story, there is so much to take away from here, is that, when your mind is set, and when your convictions are at the right place, then it can move mountains, and that's what you've done. But you've done all of that, and you went to all of these leading institutions in India. You worked in top law firm in New York, and then you decided that no, this is not for me, and I'll move to academia. So why that shift?
That was in the year 1998, almost October. Okay. And the moment I landed in Oxford, something about that place was so inspiring. Besides the fact that it was an intellectually vibrant environment, I was almost feeling that I was living history. But I will tell you that the thing that most inspired me being at Oxford was a few people. First was a person by name Lord Butler. Lord Butler used to be the Home Secretary to the government of UK and later became Cabinet Secretary. He was the master of my college, called the University College, Oxford. We were founded in the year 1249, and when I was a student in the year 1999, our college was celebrating its 750th anniversary. And Lord Butler, whenever he spoke, he would say that we are the oldest college in the English-speaking world. And once, on one such occasion, I ended up going up to him and asking him, why do you always say this? I mean, why you always mention that this oldest college in the English-speaking world? And then he told me something that I remembered. He said, in your country and in the Indian subcontinent, there were universities long before us. He mentioned Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Vikramshila, which were over 2,000 years old. In fact, long before Bologna in Italy, which was 900 years old, long before Oxford, which is 800 years old. So it kind of struck me that such extraordinary history and civilization and heritage and contribution that Indian civilization had made for higher education. And that made me also think in terms of, are there universities like Oxford in India? And if there aren't, what happened? Because the fact is, if we could have Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Vikramshila over 2,500 years ago, and some of these were global universities in the sense that they had faculty and students from around the world, they were interdisciplinary institutions, they were truly liberal arts in nature. You can study astronomy to poetry to history to philosophy in these institutions. So that kind of made me think that should we be doing something about it? And of course, that was a thought of a graduate student. When I was in 1994, I was 24 years old. I didn't know much about higher education. I was privileged to receive a scholarship. That was inspiring because it empowered me to pursue that education. But I had no idea how to go about pursuing this. But one thing was very clear, but being at Oxford, A, the fact that high quality education can be transformative for individuals. B, I was inspired by the fact that a global university can bring faculty and students from around the world and see university education can have a big impact on the world at large. These three things had got stuck in my mind so strongly that I was essentially trying to figure out what is it that I can do about it. That's when I got 3 more fellowships to go to Harvard. I got admission to Harvard University and ended up pursuing my master's degree in the US. That was an even more transformative experience. But the most important part of that experience was I quickly recognized that how education can contribute to nation building, how it can be so impactful that it can build societies, respond to big challenges of our time, and of course, in the context of STEM disciplines, it can promote advances in science and technology and can respond to problems facing the society.
I believe that post-Oxford, then you went to Harvard. So how was that experience like? And how did that shape the journey that you took after that?
When I landed up at Harvard, I got admitted to the master's degree program and I began my studies. And very quickly I realized how higher education could be a force of democratic empowerment of people, how a diverse set of people can come together, and I could see the whole world. But something interesting that I discovered during the course of my studies, that the earliest origins of the modern research university was actually from the continent, from Europe. The Humboldtian model of research university. That origin from Europe, when it ended up coming to the United States, the last 200 years of evolution of American research universities was shaped by that. But because of extraordinary impetus given to those research universities, US universities ascended so significantly and became knowledge power and could attract the best minds, both in terms of faculty and students. The more I talked to people in the United States, including from other universities, I was increasingly getting convinced about what I wanted to do. But listen, I am just a graduating student from Harvard. I had no other ways to fulfill this idea or mission. Like everybody else who was doing that, I took up a law firm job in New York. They were paying me very well. I don't think I deserved it. I began my life in New York and I got admitted to the bar of the state of New York and I was practicing law. But then this obsession that caught me, that I want to be part of an effort to build the university, was consuming me so much. I realized that the job that I was doing was not anymore appealing to me, and I quit the firm in a year and I joined New York University as a visiting fellow. The reason I joined NYU was I wanted to have that mental space, and pretty much I was unemployed. My wife was supporting me financially. Fortunately, she had a job and she liked her job, and so she was supporting the family financially, but also allowed me to pursue my dreams and aspirations, although jobless and penniless. But NYU was that amazing space in terms of intellectual ecosystem that I began to meet interesting people. One of the remarkable individuals whom I met there was a man by name Peter Schuck, who later became the chair of our International Board of Advisors, sits as a member of the governing body of the university, and has been one of the closest international friends of the university. I met another man by name Norman Dawson, who was president of the American Civil Liberties Union, a distinguished scholar himself, but also chair of the Hauser Global Law School Scholars Program, but also counselor to the president of NYU. So this story of being at NYU, or other experience of being at NYU, made me get a more deeper and a closer view of how universities function. And by the end of that experience of, say, 6 months, I was convinced that I want to do this in India. In fact, one of my conversations at the basement of NYU Law Library with Peter Schuck made me realize that this is exactly what I want to do. But at the same time, I had to know more about how to do it. And that's when I got a research opportunity in Japan. I moved to Tokyo. That was a fascinating experience in itself because of the fact that it had a robust education system. The top Japanese universities were truly amazing. They were, of course, at the vanguard of science and engineering and technology. I looked at 3 universities in Japan very closely. It became a kind of a project for me. The 3 universities I mentioned, the Tokyo University or University of Tokyo, the Waseda University, the Keio University were top class. But more importantly, the fact that they were in Asia gave me hope. That's when I got a job in Hong Kong. I landed up in Hong Kong in the year 2002. That was my first faculty position, academic job. And that, I believe, is a turning point of my life for a number of reasons. First, I got to experience the life of an academic. And I realized very quickly that this is my calling. This is what I want to be doing. Second, I loved the city of Hong Kong. The fact that it had 9 universities, 4 of them are top 100 in the world, the rest of the 5 are top 200 in the world, made me even more exciting about what I was experiencing. Third, I began to like my research. I was publishing actively, and I was actually loving the life of an academic, creating knowledge, contributing to research, inspiring young people, constantly doing new things. And of course, Hong Kong is a very vibrant place, and at least then Hong Kong had space for people to pursue different ideas. I was writing a column for the local newspaper known as the South China Morning Post. I was appearing on television. Many a time I've appeared on the Legislative Assembly in Hong Kong. I would do radio shows. So it was quite an extraordinary experience. But all along, I am essentially doing my secret pet project. Nobody knew what I was doing in terms of this project in India that I was plotting. I was, of course, traveling around the world due to my conferences. Hong Kong was very generous in supporting those conferences. And so I would go to Singapore, South Korea, Taipei, Japan, Australia, North America, Western Europe, and I would frequently come to India, and I would also go to China. The more I came to India, I was deeply disappointed with what I was seeing. And the more I went to China and other parts of the world, I was deeply inspired by what they were doing with regard to higher education.
This is so fascinating to hear the journey that you've had. And I think it is also fascinating to know that, that finding your calling is also a journey. It's not like one morning you wake up and oh God, this is what I was made to do. But it is a journey, and to keep chipping away at it. I mean, the immediate tendency is, and when you compare it, and when you said, when you came to India, you saw the condition and you were not happy. The tendency that many of us have is to say, okay, we have to get out of here, or we have to find ourselves in that space. But you had a different journey. You wanted to come back here, and to come back where? To Sonipat. So what convinced you to take this step, to pick this place and say that, okay, I'm now putting everything behind and coming here and doing this? What did it mean for you personally?
Well, thank you, Upasana. But before I answer that question, I want to tell you a backstory to this.
Yes,
please. In 2000, I was supposed to be graduating in the month of June, and in March 2000, and I was in the US applying for jobs in the UN system. I was applying for literally hundreds of jobs. And if the next big thing for me personally was to work for the United Nations. I was fascinated by what the UN stands for. I believe that as a young professional, as somebody who's committed to human rights, and that was my area of specialization as well. I pretty much specialized in comparative human rights in Oxford, also study of human rights, including human rights advocacy, human rights in international law, human rights research seminar, and also public international law at Harvard. So it was a very natural aspiration for me to aspire to join the UN. And I applied for jobs, and believe it or not, March 2000, I got a job as civil affairs officer at the United Nations mission in Kosovo. It was a dream job for me in a way, because as you know, this was a time when Slobodan Milosevic was right there, and Balkans was facing this huge challenge, and UN had established its mission, and I was all set to go to, and the job had come through. It was my dream job. And we were getting married in July 2000. And this job is in April, and this is my dream job. I was not interested in anything else. But then I realized that this is not what I could do that at that time because of my family situation. So I had to say no to this dream job at the United Nations, which is one thing. But then this obsession of wanting to join the UN quite remarkably continued. So when I joined New York law firm, and all through my life in Japan and in Hong Kong, believe it or not, every weekend I would apply for 20 jobs in the UN system. In over a period of, say, 8 years, I had applied for 1,000 jobs in the United Nations system because I was keen to join the UN. And I'm happy to report to you I didn't get a single job. I had a fantastic job, but if there is one thing that I wanted to do besides what I was doing as an academic is to join the UN. And talking about destiny, around the time, and the other part of the story which I think is important to say is that once I was obsessed with this idea of wanting to build a university in India, I had the opportunity to meet with this extraordinary man by name Naveen Jindal in October 2006. And there is a story behind that, but we'll have it another day, how I met him. But I met him in October 2006, and I was so inspired by his persona, but his passion, his commitment, his dedication to what he was doing. He had already fought the flag case, which led to the right to fly the national flag for ordinary Indians outside the government system. He himself was leading a business in steel and power. He did his master's in business administration from the University of Texas in Dallas. And I met him and began persuading him. And ultimately, he made a commitment to do three things that I had requested him. First, to make a substantial financial commitment to build a world-class university. Second, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence. So the story is that around November to December 2007, he makes this commitment and invites me to come to India. Around the same time, while much after I had applied 1,000 jobs, which I didn't get, maybe the 1,036th job I applied, I get the interview and I get the offer from the United Nations. This is a dream job at the United Nations Office of the High Commission for Human Rights in Geneva. A previous summer, we actually go on a vacation to Geneva, and it was such a beautiful place. The office was fantastic, and they were looking at my candidature, but it's a very long drawn process, UN jobs are. And I got a job exactly in the most sought after department called the Research and Right to Development branch, which was in close connection to my work on relationship between human rights and human development. And UN jobs comes with all kinds of perks, besides the UN passport, but more importantly, family support system. It's a very generous sort of international civil servant, And I get the job in the UN, and I have Mr. Jindal ready to saying, come to Sonipat, come to India. And he said, come to India, because at that time, we were not decided where to build the university. And believe it or not, it didn't take even a second for me to think where I should go. I had just forgotten the idea that I could go to Geneva. It was so interesting, and I say this to a lot of young people because most of the time we think certain things are important in life, but suddenly there may be other things which will become more important. I spent a decade trying to get much less important and significant jobs in the UN system, didn't get. And when I got the job that I would treasure, I said no to it and I moved to India.
Wow. Wow. I don't know how to respond to something like this because, it's one thing about chasing one dreams, but you've reached that dream, and to able to put that aside and say that I'm going to follow the dream that I have been nurturing for a while now.
Because it was one of those risk-taking endeavors,
Yeah,
I remember very well when I told this to some of my mentors, my professors. I had a job in Hong Kong, which was perfect. I just got a job in Geneva, which was even more perfect. And then I have a commitment from an Indian businessman, politician, philanthropist, who has said that he will put in money to build a university. Let me tell you, everybody whom I spoke, without exception, said, you are doing grave injustice to yourself and the family. You're going in harm's way. Nothing happens in this country, and it's a bad idea to come. Nobody would ever leave what you're having. And even if you have to leave Hong Kong, your choices of Hong Kong, Geneva, and somewhere in Haryana is an absolutely ridiculous choice, and you shouldn't be doing. People actually very strongly felt that I was doing a huge mistake in my life. In fact, so much so that I had to, really tell some of these mentors that I not only disagree with them, but I really felt very strongly about what they were saying is not right. But I know from where they came, because these people had seen life, they had seen India, they had seen many people breaking promises, they've seen many such endeavors not coming through, they've seen many disappointments, and so they were much more protective of the situation. But I must say that if there is one person who believed in this idea for me to do, it is my wife, Pratibha, because Pratibha was ready to make that commitment to leave everything that she was doing. And mind it, she was having an illustrious career herself. She's a very distinguished corporate lawyer. She was working for a leading U.S. law firm in New York, Tokyo, and Hong Kong, and then another law firm, and then later with Goldman Sachs. So for her to take that decision to let me again do this move to this uncertainty was quite remarkable. But in a way, in hindsight, I have to say that the pursuit of calling in life can be so empowering that I didn't think for a moment that where should be my choice, because I was so convinced. And you asked me a question earlier that how did you take the decision? I was so convinced that this is important for India, and it's almost like it's me being me in the position to do it is immaterial. It needs to be done, and India needs universities of this kind, and I am just an instrument and an opportunity for me to be part of this. But the fact that the cause is so large that any individual motivated me and inspired me to do this.
Well, I'm so glad that you spoke about Pratibha, your wife, and I think that the decision that you took, and extraordinary that decision was, both at that moment and also in retrospect. If it did not work, you would have many who would stand and say, "Told you so," at this point of time. But perhaps the only voice for you, I mean, I'm assuming, which mattered at that point of time, that you have the support of Pratibha. The story is as much as hers as yours. I think the conviction is as much as hers as yours. I think this is something that she truly believed in too. At least she believed in you. And I think if Indian higher education today is grateful to you, is celebrating you for what you have been able to achieve, or the path that you're showing to Indian higher education today, I think we should equally celebrate the support that Pratibha gave to that decision. Is it true? And we know that you met Pratibha during your Delhi University law faculty days. Is it true that, and of course you wanted to pursue higher education and you wanted to go to Oxford and Harvard. And we know that Pratibha is an Oxford and Harvard graduate. So how much of it was also motivated by the fact that she was going there?
Well, it's very interesting you ask this question because um, I would say that she was always motivated to go to Harvard. She was, many years ago when she was young, she had visited Harvard Law School and took a picture at the Langdale Law Library. And I think even at a high school level, she was having that picture and wanting to go there. I came into, her life much later. In fact, she was 1 year junior to me in law faculty. I was in the batch of 1994 to 97, and she was in the batch of 95 to 98. And strangely, I had not met her at all although I knew some of her friends, and she knew some of my friends, but I had somehow not met her. And so the story is something like this. On 13th of December, 1997, I got the Rhodes Scholarship in Calcutta. Then I returned back to Delhi. And on 22nd December, I visit the law faculty, Delhi University, to convey this news to my professors and others. That's when there was this a girl standing in that admin office. When I was telling this to one of the staff members, she overheard that conversation, and she walked up to me and asked me, congratulated me, and said that she is applying to universities abroad, and she thought it would be nice if I can, help her. She was applying to Harvard, and she was already a very bright and brilliant student. She did her undergrad from Kirodimal College and did her law there. And we went through the application process, and several months into my interactions with her, there's something about her that it was a spark. I quickly felt that this is somebody who I want to spend good part of my life. So and she was applying to Harvard, and I had admission to Oxford. So I actually persuaded her to apply to Oxford, and she very reluctantly, because there was no context. Her sister was in the US, so naturally her thinking was more to be going to US, and I kind of persuaded her to apply to Oxford, and lo and behold, she got into Oxford and Harvard, and she deferred her admission to Harvard, and she ended up going to Oxford with me. We were fortunate to be in the same class at Oxford. And then I applied to Harvard because I actually, at that time, when I applied for Rhodes, I applied to two places. I applied to Oxford for Rhodes Scholarship. I also applied to Yale Law School. I got admission to Yale as well. But after Oxford, since she was anyways going to Harvard, there was no question of thinking about going anywhere else. So there is that element to the idea that we were very fortunate at both at Oxford and Harvard. We were classmates, although our courses were very different. She was interested in corporate law, financial law, and aspects of that.
Wow. So now, after so many years, and you have two beautiful children, how does the balancing act happen? How do you manage your professional commitments vis-a-vis your personal commitments? As somebody who has been working at the university for a while and working closely with you, we know that you are working 24/7. So in that, how does the balancing act between family life and professional life happen?
Well, in all these things, there is one important disclaimer that she will have another story to tell. But it's public knowledge that I spend so little time for the family. Obviously, that takes a heavy toll on the fact that we don't spend enough time, not only with Pratibha, but also with the kids. But I think my kids and Pratibha understands and appreciates what we are doing, and they've let me doing. When she's in a good mood and she's happy, she calls, I am her corporate social responsibility. I am the CSR of her. But the reality is the balancing is a tough one. And I do believe that I think building an institution is an extremely difficult thing in India. It's not so much about the actual administration, but so much of our work is about externalities, dealing with external factors constantly in the formative stage and now. But I would like to say that both Pratibha and the kids have been extremely forgiving, very, very generous about the kind of unpredictability and my time. But I have to say something very even more interesting, because Pratibha works as hard as me as well. But there is something about the way she does it, that she ensures that the time for the family is not compromised, and she switches off much better than me. I am terrible at it. My obsession continues to be what I am doing, and because of which I don't switch off easily. But I do think that this opportunity to, this effort that we are on to seek a balance in our lives is a continuous effort. And I have realized more, particularly during COVID, I must say that we got to spend a lot more time together, all of us around the world, and we realized how much it has come at a time when we couldn't have done that in ordinary times. So she is more forgiving about the fact that I don't give enough time.
Raj, the incredible journey that you've had so far, of all the things that you've achieved, of all the things that you're going to achieve, something that is truly inspiring for young people who are watching this is, you are a social entrepreneur. So all those young minds who are at this point of time on the verge of taking that leap of faith, on the verge of doing something that they think that can make a difference, that they are passionate about, what advice would you give?
Well, first and most important thing is that to believe that nothing is impossible, and constantly tell to yourself, I strongly believe nothing is impossible. Second, no shortcuts. Hard work, determination, dedication will help you to achieve that goal. Third, I believe, is that don't trust others' instincts. Develop your own instincts. There will be a lot of people who will tell you that this can't be done. Don't accept that. Don't take no for an answer. Push your boundaries and convince yourself and yourself alone as to whether it can be done or not, and you will have the answer. Follow your own lead in it. The fourth is that be honest, be sincere, have integrity. You can't compromise on these values, because these values will shape not only your own person, but also your ability to take others together. And the last, I believe, is that develop empathy. A deeper sense of empathy to other people will ensure that you are going to travel this journey not alone. It's a long journey. There are going to be a lot of disappointments, and the journey will get much easier if you have fellow travelers. You constantly work towards convincing other people. You'll be very surprised that many skeptics who will end up becoming fellow travelers, supporters, cheerleaders, and even partners and collaborators in your endeavor.
Raj, we've had a interesting conversation so far. We've asked some serious questions, some personal questions. We want to do a quick rapid fire with you, if that is okay.
You get a gift? Do I get a gift?
There is no gift. The gift are the questions. But we would be really, really interested to know your quick and one-word possibly response to the following questions. Better student or better teacher?
Better teacher.
Father as a vice-chancellor, pressure or inspiration?
Inspiration.
Harvard or Oxford?
Oxford.
What do you miss more, being a teacher or being a lawyer?
Being a teacher.
What was harder, giving up non-veg for your wife or learning Hindi to set up an enterprise in Sonipat?
Giving non-veg.
All right. Kanyakumari or Sonipat?
Tough one.
Tough one.
Sonipat.
Wow. Okay. UK, USA, Japan or Hong Kong?
Japan.
Wow. All right. Okay. This is going to be a tough one. Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge or Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum?
Oh, DDLJ. Hands down.
Surya or Shah Rukh Khan?
Shah Rukh.
Okay. Kapil Dev or MS Dhoni?
Kapil Dev, of course.
Favorite dish?
Rabdi Faluda.
Wow, okay. How many hours do you sleep?
5 to 6.
Okay. What is the source of your energy?
The people whom I interact and work with.
Wonderful. Who is your inspiration?
Mahatma Gandhi.
That's all we have. Thank you so much for answering candidly to all our questions. And thank you to all of you who have joined in virtually to be part of this conversation. Raj, that was truly inspiring and fascinating. And I do hope we can do this again sometime.
Thank you very much, Upasana, for all those this conversation, but also allowing me to speak and share some of my thoughts and journeys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.